Thank you very much. We appreciate everybody's time, and it looks like still a lot of people are coming in, and this will be recorded if you didn't catch the very beginning here. So, Tricia, I'm actually going to let you kick this off for us.
That would be great. Let's go to the agenda slide then. All right, thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate your time. We're going to start with a brief overview about our company, American Payment Solutions. We're going to talk a little bit about the differences in payment processors that you find out there, and then we'll jump into the meat of the webinar and talk about the key considerations we feel that everyone needs to be aware of when selecting a payment processor. We will touch upon some of the benefits from APS, and then we'll talk about some next steps if you're interested in taking the conversation further. So a little bit about us. We have been in the payment processing industry for over 25 years, and today dozens of merchants in the US as well as in Canada through our merchant service provider affiliate, North American Payment Solutions. We work with companies that are in a variety of sectors: hospitality, restaurants, e-commerce, ERP, retail, manufacturing, and more. These customers vary. They have monthly volumes ranging typically between 2,000 and 10 million. That tends to be our sweet spot. But we process for companies that process less than 2,000 as well as more than 10 million. So we really run the gamut. One of the things we're very supportive is our customer support team. Our main office is in Arizona, and that's where our support team, they will answer the phone when you call. We don't require queues. We don't require support tickets. We are really there to serve our customers. That's very important to us. And then another thing that we will dive into a little bit more deeply further on in the webinar is PCI compliance. It's very important when you're accepting and processing credit cards, and we make sure we support our customers to be sure that they are PCI compliant. So when you're looking at payment processors, there are a variety of similarities as well as differences. And you'll find differences in the types of billing. It might be tiered, it might be flat rate, it might be interchange plus. We'll touch upon that later on in this presentation. Monthly fees, they may fluctuate or they may be guaranteed. Again, that's something you'll want to understand clearly. We have here integration with ERP software, but integration with shopping carts and point of sale systems is also important because it allows for much more seamless workflow. Then is the payment processor, are they a gateway or are they a processor or are they both? You want to be sure that you understand that. And I just touched upon our customer support. That's something very important to consider. Their availability, the hours, the location, what is the process? Because they need to be there to support you. So with that said, we're going to jump into what we believe are the 5 key considerations you need to look at when you are selecting a processor. And with that, I'll hand it back to Bryce.
Great, thanks, Tricia. So when it comes to credit card processing, it's a necessary evil for companies, right? But when you're looking at the differences between all the different processors out there, we've compiled all of those differences into 5 different groups. One is PCI compliance. This is by far the most important part of processing through a processor. That's really not talked a lot about by a lot of our competition. So we wanted to touch on that and really make sure our clients and merchants out there understand what PCI compliance means and how it affects their companies. We're also going to talk about monthly fees. That's the second most important part. Is you need to be secure and you need to make sure you're not paying too much for processing credit cards. The third is seamless integration. Obviously, I run our ERP practice here at APS, but we have other parts of our company. Like Tricia said, we have e-commerce, retail, hospitality, restaurant, and all of those different segments of industries all have their own integrations that require for credit card processing. We're going to touch on that briefly. Accessibility funds, right? Next day funding, 2-day funding, 3-day funding. Are your batches being withheld? How do chargebacks happen? Those are all very, very important parts of choosing a credit card processor as well. And then also cost-saving opportunities. Are there programs out there that benefit your company to lower your fees? And these are the subjects we're going to cover briefly today. First is PCI compliance. So what is it? Payment Card Industry Standard Data Security Standard. PCI DSS is technically the acronym in our industry. And it was created by the card brands, meaning Visa and MasterCard, to protect consumer credit card data. So think of it as the watchdogs in our industry to make sure that when you're processing a credit card as a merchant here in the US, that you're following the guidelines that both the feds and Visa and MasterCard, Discover, and American Express have created to make sure that if you were ever hacked, breached, or somebody physically stole your terminal, server, computer, or point of sale, that the credit card data is secure. We always hear about these very, very large breaches that happen, right? Target was a very large recent hit. The reason why that's important is because when that happens, all those credit cards, if they're not stored correctly and in the correct place, one, it allows for a lot of fraudulent activity, but two, there's a very large fines that you will incur as a company if you're ever breached. So merchants must adhere to these compliance requirements to avoid those fees and also avoid the risk. It takes a lot of time and energy to go through that audit trail if you actually are ever breached. So also non-compliance, meaning if you don't pass what's called the self-assessment questionnaire here in the United States, and you have to do that annually, if you don't pass that self-assessment questionnaire, you do incur a monthly fee. Now, this typically ranges anywhere from $15 to $40 a month. It's not that big of a fee for most mid to large size companies, but it's really more of a reminder, a monthly reminder that, hey, you are in non-compliance right now, and if you're breached and you're non-compliant, then you have to fit the bill for all those fines and pay for all those chargebacks and investigation that takes place. Last I heard, those fines started at $10,000 and they go up to obviously several million depending on the severity of the breach. So some of the benefits of becoming compliant. One is your clients are protected. You build trust and credibility. I will tell you that I've dealt with many companies that are fairly large wholesalers, manufacturers, and either the federal government or some of these large big box stores that purchase from them actually require a certification, a PCI DSS certification from them before they're willing to give up their credit card. And that's simply because they've had a bad experience once before with another vendor. So it is very important that you get that certification. Second, you avoid the significant fines that we were just talking about. And literally all you have to do is do a self-assessment questionnaire, which your processor should help you with that. Third is if you're using some kind of internet connectivity to process your credit card, so if it's integrated within like an accounting software or ERP, e-commerce, or even just internet credit card terminal, your processor should be scanning you at least once a quarter to make sure you don't have ports open, make sure your firewall set up correctly. That way hackers can't break in and steal that. One thing about PCI compliance, we as a company, American Payment Solutions, we offer this service completely free at no charge to our merchants. So industry standard, typically a credit card processor is going to farm out PCI compliance to a third-party company. So for example, if you use processor ABC, you're going to sign up for a merchant account with them. They're going to get you set up and integrated. And then at that point, you're either going to receive a phone call or an email from a third-party company. The largest here in the States is TrustWave, and they're actually going to reach out to you and help you with your self-assessment questionnaire. The problem with that scenario, when you are using the ERP or shopping cart or accounting software, is TrustWave, or that third-party large company that only does PCI compliance, does not understand the nuances of your system. So when you go through that self-assessment questionnaire with them, they don't really know how to help you, and they don't understand your system. So you really have to be an IT expert in order to answer those questions, because no one's really assisting you. Where us as a company, we understand your program, we understand the software because we were the ones that deployed it, or the point of sale or shopping cart, and we actually do the self-assessment questionnaire in-house. We will call our merchants and make sure that they're able to set up their systems correctly so they are PCI compliant. And we do that at no cost. That's just one of the value adds that we bring to the industry. So the second, and I know there's probably a lot of people on this call right now that this is really why they came here, is the monthly fees. Why am I paying so much? Or maybe I'm not sure if I have a good rate. maybe it is good and I just don't know. Monthly fees. So as Trisha pointed out earlier in the call, there's a lot of different ways you can be on your merchant account. So there's hard costs in our industry. It's called interchange and assessment fees. And that's typically the bulk of your bill, meaning regardless of your processor, that portion of your bill will not change. But your processor will sign you up on some other programs to kind of hide those so they can build in more fees. And typically that's going to be on a flat rate. Everybody on the call, I'm sure, has heard of the company Square. They typically charge like a 2.75% for a swipe, or a 3.5% plus 15 cents per transaction for keyed in or online transactions. That's a flat rate. You pay the same rate regardless of the card you accept, regardless of the hard cost of that transaction you accept. So obviously the profit margin built into those pricing varies greatly per transaction. Typically they're making about 1% on top though. There's also tiered pricing. So instead of having one flat rate for keyed in transactions at 3.5%, like a flat rate, now you're going to have three different rates instead: 2.1%, 2.8%, 3.5%. Sometimes it goes all the way up to 4.5%, depending on the risk of your company. So tiered pricing really takes a flat rate and stretches it out to where if you accept a debit card as credit over the phone or keyed in, you're only going to pay 2.1% instead of the 3.5% Square would have charged you. So again, slightly better than flat rate because it does offer you some cost savings, but it doesn't go all the way. And that's really what Interchange Plus is created for. Interchange Plus, you can see here, merchants pay the hard costs associated with each transaction, meaning coming from the card brand. So if you accept a Visa debit card and you keyed in as credit, the hard cost on that transaction is percent plus 22 cents. So rather than paying on a tiered or 3.5% on a flat, now you're 0.5% plus whatever the processor charges on top of that. So even if they charged you 0.5% on top, you're still only paying 0.55% on Interchange Plus instead of 2.1% on a tiered structure. So it's much more transparent, and it offers you as a merchant the ability to get much, much lower fees on those cheaper cards. So I'm going to briefly show you. So this is really just a recap. It's showing you, hey, here's a flat rate. Typically flat rate companies, meaning merchant processors, are the very large Silicon Valley startups like a Square or a PayPal. And they do this for simplicity. It's really designed for very small merchants out there. So if you have a lawn mowing business and you want a very simple to set up merchant account and simple fees, flat rate is perfect for you. But once you start doing more and more volume, you know, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month, you start to pay quite a bit of money for simplicity's sake. Now, when it comes to the tiered pricing, this is really created for companies that kind of fall in that $5,000 to $20,000 a month range. It's simple pricing, but it's a little bit lower pricing than a flat rate. And again, Interchange Plus, this is the much more transparent. If you have an internal CFO, controller, or anybody who runs your finances of your company, Interchange Plus is going to make by far the most sense for your company because it is transparent, and they're actually going to be able to look at their bill and see the itemized transactional data of all the credit cards you accepted, plus the small markup that your processor is charging you. And you can see there at the bottom, typically the charges coming from the merchant processor on range anywhere from 0% above the actual hard cost. And that's the portion of the bill that's negotiated between the processor and you as the merchant. And you really do have some flexibility there to make sure you're getting the best rate possible in the industry today. And I'm sure there's going to be questions on this. We can answer also if you have questions about this and you want a more detailed analysis of what fee structure you're currently on and what we can offer, we'd be happy to assist you one-on-one with that as well. So next, seamless integration. Now, I know a lot of people on this call are using ERP or some kind of point of sale, and you really need a processor who can assist you in all the arenas as you grow. You don't want to have multiple processors doing your point of sale, your online transactions, plus you're keyed in through your accounting system or ERP. So what does APS have to offer? On this screen, you can see we integrate with hundreds of shopping carts. We just put some of the most popular ones that we're running into today. We have the out-of-the-box integration with Magento, Shopify, WooCommerce, Auth.net. Those are by far the most popular online shopping carts and web management services. Also for a point of sale, if you're using Aloha, Micros, Shift4, those three really cover about 80% of the marketplace for point of sale and property management systems. And we have out-of-the-box integrations for all those as well. Now, when it comes to accounting packages, right, if you use an ERP, we integrate with QuickBooks Pro, Premier Enterprise, Sage 100, Sage 300, Acumatica, and we're coming out with SAP B1 here shortly. We do have many other integrations. A lot of them are kind of niche ERPs that most people don't know about. So, one of the ones we're working on right now is called Versa Accounts, right? It's more like a QuickBooks style. We have several of those types of integrations that we don't market with the actual developer itself. So if you're using one of those ERPs, or maybe an ERP that's not listed here, let us know, and odds are we already have the integration or it'll be done sometime this year. So accessibility to funds. I could tell you numerous stories of companies that they sign up for a merchant processor because they had good fees, they had the integration, the integration they had was PCI compliant, they sign up, and then all of a sudden, halfway through the first month, their batch doesn't come through. They process a $30,000 transaction because they're a wholesaler, and the $30,000 gets held by the processor until you actually prove that that was a true transaction. So you're sitting here waiting to ship out your goods to your client. Usually it's your biggest client because they're paying you that large for a single order, and your funds are withheld. So now you kind of have to stop what you're doing, call your processor, try to figure it out. You're not really sure what's going on. So accessibility to funds is a really big deal. One of the first questions we always like to ask is, when do you batch out? Meaning you're processing sales orders, invoices, you're picking your items, you're shipping your items, and then when does your system actually batch out? Is it set to auto batch, or are you manually batching out? If you're a restaurant, typically you're batching out multiple times a day. But if you're a manufacturer, distributor, wholesaler, or even retail, typically you have a set time every day that you batch out. You want to make sure with your processor that you're batching out before their batch cutoff time. If you're batching out after that cutoff time, typically that's going to slow down the funds actually coming into your bank account. So we as a company have two options for next day funding. One is 9 p.m. Eastern time. The money will hit your account the following morning at 8 a.m. And the other is actually past midnight. The money will still hit your account the next day. Next day funding is very, very critical for a lot of our large ticket item clients that sell in bulk, because they want to make sure the money is good before the product actually gets shipped, especially if they're doing international shipping. If you're shipping $50,000 items international, you really want to make sure that the pre-authorization or the sale is good before you lose that money to a brand new client out of a foreign country that maybe they issue a chargeback or close that account and you can't get those funds. How fast do you have access to your funds? This really comes through with American Express. There's a lot of questions on next day funding with Amex. So if you qualify for what's called the American Express Off the Blue program, you can get American Express transactions the very next day with next day funding. So these are all the nuances that we typically like to walk merchants through to make sure that they understand when are they getting their money currently, how are they doing the reconciliation process, meaning is their CFO doing a daily reconciliation, making sure the batches, the gross profit, the gross sales they ran on a Monday actually deposits into their bank account Tuesday morning. If not, is it coming through Wednesday, sometimes even Thursday? And how do we shore up some of those issues that they're running into to make their bookkeeping, their daily or weekly or monthly bookkeeping and reconciliation process smoother for them? With our next day funding, that really does take care of the majority of those issues, since they get next day funding on Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express. But a lot of it has to do with reporting. We really need to make sure our merchants understand where the money is flowing and how can we help them, whether that's within the ERP system, our virtual terminal, or just reconciling back to when they log into the bank. Also, do you have high ticket sales? Like I mentioned, there are some clients out there that we run into that approach us and say, hey, I had a $100,000 transaction come through, largest transaction, largest sale we've ever made as a company, and the funds were held for a week by our processor. What do we do? So we can't really help you with your current processor in those scenarios because they may have certain regulations, internal regulations that they go by that maybe they don't have the funds to give that $100,000 to you next day. So they're scared of giving it to you, thinking that you may walk away and close your bank account, and then a chargeback comes through, and now they're out $100,000. So rest assured, our company is large enough, and we specialize in large ticket because of our ERP integrations. We know how to handle these transactions correctly and efficiently, to where our merchants aren't getting held up on their funding time to move forward and ship out those large ticket item payments that they're receiving. So that really covers accessibility to funds. Now, I will tell you that there's a number of issues I'm not covering here that has to do with accessibility funds. If you're having a funding issue with your company right now, if you're a controller and maybe daily reconciliation is kind of a pain with you trying to reconcile your checks, your cash, your credit card payments, your American Express payments, give us a call or shoot us an email. We're happy to walk you through that process and help you out. So the last thing here, and I promise you this is the biggest to a lot of people on the call, is cost-saving opportunities. Are there programs out there that actually, one, lower the hard cost with Visa and MasterCard, or two, help you with an integration that helps lower some of those costs? One of the biggest differentiators in merchant processing today is called Level 3 processing. This was introduced back in 2011. But a lot of processors haven't adopted it yet, or they're having to start adopt it now because some of their competitors, like our company, has been offering it for years, and many companies are lowering their costs so much that other processors literally can't even compete with the pricing that companies like ours is able to offer when we do Level 3 processing. So some people, some aren't, since it's a relatively new program, a lot of people don't fully understand it. But from a 30,000-foot view, Level 3 processing is designed for Visa and MasterCard corporate and government cards to lower the fees. So typically on these transactions, if you're on an interchange plus, about 2.6 to 2.7%. And then you're paying your processor's markup. So we'll just call it 3% on average that you're paying for these type of transactions. Level 3 processing, that 3% can sometimes be all the way down to 1% items. And on normal transactions, so transactions that are $5,000, $500, $300, instead of paying 3%, now you're going to pay 1.8% plus the markup. So closer to 2%, 2.1%. So you actually, if you do a lot of business to business, in fact, we have one client right now that all they do is they sell it to the Department of Defense, the DoD, and they're all government cards. So right now they're paying 3%. Now they're paying 2% with APS. There's a lot of nuances to Level 3, meaning we have to build an integration for you if we don't already have one in your ERP system to make sure we're able to collect all the data that's required for a Level 3 integration. The nice thing is with Sage 100, Sage 300, Acumatica, soon to be SAP 1, we already have Level 3 processing built into the integration we've already written. And we pull itemized details off of your invoice, your sales order, customer maintenance screens, to where you don't have to do anything differently than what you're doing right now as far as processing a pre-authorization or a sale based on a sales order or an invoice in order to qualify those transactions that are B2B or B2G as Level 3. And you can see there's additional savings for large ticket items as well. So if you as a company do have transactions that are $25,000 all the way up to $1 million on a single ticket, instead of paying 1.8%, you can pay as low as 0.4% for the same exact transaction that you're getting charged 2.65% on right now. I went some companies that are ERP end users, we've been able to save 6 figures annually to, simply because of level 3. It's that powerful. So that's one of the largest cost saving opportunities that exist today in the merchant industry, that if you aren't taking advantage of it right now, or maybe you're not familiar with that program and you think you might qualify, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to walk you through it, show you a demo, and also analyze your statement to let you know which cards would qualify and how much savings there would be for you. Lastly, this is a second program that really could help companies who are not taking advantage of this right now. American Express traditionally had their own merchant account for every company. So if you've been processing credit cards for longer than a year, you probably are familiar with having 2 separate merchant accounts, one with your merchant processor, and they do your Visa, MasterCard, and Discover. And you have a second merchant account with American Express directly, and they actually dictate the fees for Amex. And typically you're paying 3%, 3.5% all in for that direct Amex relationship. Now that they're trying to compete more heavily with Visa and MasterCard, they came out with this new program called OptBlue, which allows us processors the ability to process your American Express transactions on their behalf, just like we do the other card brands. So you can see it's relatively, it came out in May 2014, and it allows us to lower the fees for you. That's the #1 benefit. So instead of paying 3 to 3.5%, now you're paying 2.2 to 2.8% for the same exact cards. Also, when it comes to next day funding, now we can consolidate those American Express transactions into the same exact batch that we deposit next day for Visa, MasterCard, Discover. So now there's a single batch coming into your bank account from your processor, so it makes daily reconciliation and weekly reconciliation much easier. Also, if you ever have a chargeback on an American Express, currently, if you have an American Express direct account, you have to call Amex and try to dispute that chargeback. Now, we all know how great American Express is at customer service, but keep in mind that's for the actual card user. That's not necessarily for the merchant processor. We love American Express. They're a great partner of ours, and they have their strengths, and that's really for the actual consumer itself. But we're a merchant processor. We're advocates for the actual merchant itself, and that's why when you are disputing a chargeback that comes through your system, you really want to make sure you're dealing with your processor because they have your best interest at heart, not the actual card user. Also, customer service. If you have any issues with your programming or you want to understand better about reporting on your pre-auth, outstanding pre-authorizations hanging out there, it's better to call one company than try to figure out which card was used and which company do I call. So kind of to wrap up some of the differences between our company and some of the other processors out there, we do have 24/7 on-site customer support. Keep in mind, during normal business hours, that's here in Mesa. Our offshore after hours is in Tempe, Arizona. It's literally down the street. So you're always dealing with somebody here in the States when you're dealing with our company, whether that's 2 a.m. or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Online management and reporting. We would have to do an entirely hour-long seminar to talk about our reporting capabilities for our merchants. If you're interested in getting better big data analytics for accepting maybe some chargeback risks that you're trying to assess if you have a large website or a large number of transactions, we have a lot of tools that we provide to all of our merchants, regardless of their size, at no cost, to make sure that as they grow as a company and as their credit card transactions grow, that they have a really good grip and understanding of the workflow of the credit cards that are coming through their system. Also, we have a very quick approval process. So once we receive your merchant application, if it's an ERP integrated account, typically we're ready to turn around and integrate within 3 to 5 business days. If it's e-commerce, right, it depends on what shopping cart you're using. We have to use that third-party shopping cart and integrate, so that could take maybe a few days longer. And if it's a point of sale, typically that's the very next day. It's very quick to turn those around. But we really have this down to a science. We're boarding anywhere from 100 to 250 brand new merchants every single month. And we really have a great workflow internally to have those merchants come on to APS really quick so they can start seeing those cost savings right away. Next day funding is available. This is available to all of our merchants. If you're approved for a merchant account at APS, we offer next day funding to you, and we do not charge for that. We have no merchant support fees. You can, regardless of your integration that you're using that we provide, we have no maintenance, no module fees, no installation fees, no support fees. You know, we are a merchant processor that happens to have integrations, not the other way around. I already covered the installation process. That's very quick, but also we're able to process it internationally. So if your company is part of a global conglomerate, we can actually be the merchant processor for you in the US, you in Canada, and we can connect the other parts of your organization through your ERP, accounting point of sale system, online system, through our gateway. So if you have, maybe your headquarters is in Sweden, but you have manufacturing in Mexico and you have your sales arm here in the States, we can help you in all three arenas. Just let us know what countries you need and which processors in those other countries you use. We'd be happy to show you a roadmap of how to get that done. I already mentioned the Amex Blue program. If you're not taking advantage of that, or if you're not sure if you have that, please let us know. It's detrimental. It can save you all the way up to 1% on Amex transactions. And level 3, like I said, if you do B2G or B2B transactions here in the States, let us know. That's going to be a game changer for your merchant account. So Tricia, I think I need to take like 5 drinks of water. Do you want to go ahead and run through the process of switching to APS if somebody?
Absolutely. Thank you, Bryce. As Bryce mentioned, we would be happy to answer any of the questions, not only at the end of this webinar, but if you wanted us to talk more in depth with regards to the level 3, to the fees you're being charged. And one of the best ways we can do that is to analyze your merchant statements. We can take a look at your merchant statements and compare, and then give you an analysis and payment solution fees would be, so you have an understanding of where those differences are. And again, if you are taking a lot of government or corporate cards, level 3 is huge in that, as is American Express and the OptBlue. So what would be the process in switching over to American Express? As I just mentioned, submit your merchant statements. Let us take a look. We'll do an analysis. Then we'll set up some time and we will review the findings with you and the savings. And it's also just a good exercise to do so that you know what you're currently being charged. We can point out some things, maybe some hidden fees that you're being charged, and explain them to you so you have a better understanding. You can go back to your current processor to get some clarification. If you choose to move over to APS, we have you complete the application process. We hand it off to our implementation team, and then they work hand in hand with you to deploy and get running up on American Express and on American Payment Solutions. And as Bryce says, this is a very quick process. It's all done within our organization. We don't outsource anything, and we can make it happen quickly and seamlessly for you. And if we could go to the next slide, please. Another statements, we have a blog. It's up on our website. Keep in touch with us via that. We have ongoing webinars that are on our website as well. If you sign up, we will get notifications out to you. And then we have a Twitter account that you can keep in touch. And we'll put information up there, not only about our company, but about the industry. So it's just good little tidbits of information for anybody who is accepting credit cards to be aware of. So I think right now we would probably be ready to, and while Adrian does that, what you see on the screen is contact information for myself and Bryce, as well as Patty Benitez. So if you are currently using Sage 100, 300, 500, X3, and have any questions or want to have your merchant statements analyzed, go ahead and send those to Patty. You'll see her email right there. If you're using QuickBooks, Acumatica, or SAP, go ahead and send me your questions. And then Bryce, obviously, from an ERP solutions manager, he is very, very knowledgeable in the industry. Any one of us can take your question and get back to you as quickly as possible. Adrienne, do we have any questions?
We do. We have quite a few questions, and I do have a poll I would like to launch, if I may, while we're announcing the questions. If the audience can take a moment to answer this poll, are you interested in learning how much American Payment Solutions can save your company? If you could just take a second to answer that poll, that would be great. And Brenna, yes, we will be making this presentation available after the webinar. Just keep a heads up for an email coming from me, Adrian, Adrian, at erpvar.com. That will have the recording for this webinar and all the contact information that we showed you on the contact slide. So that'll be easy for you to reach out to whomever is applicable to your question. So thank you for that, Brenna. And is there any integration with PayPal through your processing service? Thank you, Katie.
So PayPal is one of our partners. We use some specific integration. So in your scenario, we can have PayPal be integrated. When it comes to an ERP integration, though, PayPal really doesn't work that well for card not present fully inside of an ERP. If it's e-commerce, absolutely, you can use both APS for credit cards, PayPal for PayPal payments. We'd be happy to walk you through that process and show you some of the examples of what we've already done for customers. Also, just walk you through some of the scenarios that we can help set up for you. I think that's a great question, though.
And Katie has another question here. Do you currently have any customers who are using Sage 500?
No, so Sage 500, our integration is going to be out by Sage Summit. So we already have companies who are willing to test that integration for us as development wraps up here at the beginning of summer. But no, we don't have any customers on Sage 500 now, but we have hundreds on Sage 100 and Sage 300.
So Katie, if you're interested in learning more about that, then maybe we could start out with that comparison, merchant statement comparison that you guys offer, Bryce, and then see how much possibly you could be saving Katie. And by the time that integration comes out, then possibly she can engage with you guys.
Yeah, and can I just add one more thing to that? So for the integrations we have coming out, we're still having companies approach us to walk through the actual financial side, the numbers and the savings side too, because we would like to know how many merchants out there are ready to jump on with us come July, come August, when for Sage 500 specifically, because the savings may be so large that it may actually be worth it to you to use our virtual terminal or maybe use us for your online sales. Because if we are able to provide you so much savings that it makes sense for you to switch today, we'd be happy to do that. And if you're doing all of your transactions card not present through Sage 500 today using another processor that's already integrated, at least it's going to help you understand come summer how much money you could expect to save if you were to switch once the integration is completed.
And I do see that only 56% of the audience has voted. It'd be awesome if we could move the needle there. If you could just take a moment and answer this poll, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you, audience. And we know time is hard to come by, and we really appreciate you spending an hour with us. It looks like we're going to finish up a little bit early, which is always a good thing. Bryce and Trisha, we have about 75% voted, so I'd like to stay on the line for a little bit here.
This is a very important voting election time in our lives, so let's make sure everybody vote.
That's for sure. But you know what? We need options. Options are always a good thing. Okay, we're at 81%. And Bryce, I remember you mentioning something quite significant previously. Can you share with us the story of the Sage 100 customer, I believe it was, who saved an inordinate amount when they switched over from their current processor to you guys? Do you recall?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's hard to forget that one. So it was a Stage 100 end user. They were interested in taking a look at what we could do. With that said, they had huge reservations on actually switching the merchant account because they'd been processing through their corporate bank, Bank of America, for this particular company, for over 20 years. Really good relationship with their banker, but they did want to see if maybe they could lower some of their fees. So they provided the merchant statements to us, and when we delivered the results back, they were absolutely floored. We were able to save them over $10,000 a month in credit card fees. That's because they did a lot of B2B, and because they had been with their processor for so long, we're pretty sure that they were creeping up the rates over time through the years. So they're now a happy client of APS. That was about a year ago now. So they've already saved over $100,000 by switching to APS. I will tell you that the controller of that company was almost fearful of providing the results back to his CEO because the cost savings was so large. He was wondering, hey, that means we've been overpaying for all these years, but it has a happy ending. The CEO is very thrilled, and now they're integrated as well. They were not integrated before.
So with that said, I just want to say thank you so much to the audience for participating in this poll and joining us today. And great presentation, Bryce and Tricia. This is such a great subject to get educated on, because there's so many ways that everyone can just win and save if you pull off the layers and understand the inner workings of credit card processing. You can actually, purchase other things for your company with the savings that can even help you grow more. So we really appreciate you guys spending time and educating us.
Perfect. Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, everybody, for attending. We look forward to talking to all of you individually.
Have a fantastic day.
Thank
I'm going
you,
to go
everyone.
ahead and close out this poll, and everybody just take care.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.